Welcome to the Managing Your Reading List online tutorial created for Brunel Headstart. My name is Courtney Hopf, and I'm an Academic Skills Advisor with the Ask Academic Skills team at Brunel University. Many students are surprised when they first arrive at university to discover just how much reading they're expected to do. And they call it reading for a degree for a reason. It's because you will be doing a lot of it. And one of the big questions we tend to get here in the academic skills team is, how am I supposed to read everything? How am I supposed to get through these piles and stacks of books that all of my different tutors have set me to read? Well, the answer to that question is actually, you're not supposed to. There's no way you could possibly read every word of all of those books and journal articles and other handouts. The key skill you need to learn when you first get to university is how to read effectively and selectively. Once you master that, you'll get a lot further with the reading you need to do. So when you first get to university, you're going to be handed reading lists from most of your tutors, and those lists will have two different kinds of texts. They'll have required reading and recommended reading. Obviously, you should read the required reading no matter what. The recommended reading, you'll need to look through carefully and select what's going to be most useful for the kind of research you're going to be doing, for the subtopic of the papers you're writing, and that sort of thing. So let's look at a little exercise that can help you start to figure out how to handle your own reading lists. So we're going to look at the reading list of someone named April. She started at university a few weeks ago, and she's studying anthropology. Her tutors assigned a 2,000-word essay on what anthropology is and what its main concerns are. The tutors provided the students with a reading list for this assignment and for the term as a whole. Now, after the lecture, April's coursemate Simon also tells her about a source that he's found useful during his research. So April added this source to the bottom of her reading list, and now she needs to go through and select which reading she's going to use to prepare for her assignment. Now, here's a copy of April's assignment and reading list. What I would like you to do is pause this tutorial for a few moments and read through this list and try to decide for yourself which of the texts you think April should read to make the most of her time and also to get the best mark on her essay. Now that you've had some time to look through the reading list, I want to show you some of the main rules you want to be following when deciding what to do with your own reading. Number one is you should generally read the most recent materials. This doesn't always hold, but for most cases, when it comes to academic writing, contemporary authors will be referencing the older texts and the ones that have stood the test of time anyway. So the information from those older texts will probably be in the newer texts as well. You also want to make sure you target your reading to your task. So think very carefully about what topics you need to cover, what specific areas are important to you for the assignment and the question you've been set, and try to target them from the very beginning. At the same time, you also want to get a general overview, so make sure you have at least one text that gives you a good round background of the topic that you're working on. And also be very aware of the kinds of texts you choose. Their authority and their credibility has a bearing on your authority and your credibility as a writer. So you want to choose them carefully because the kinds of texts you use can make you look good or can make you look bad. So let's go back to April's assignment and have a look, her reading list, and have a look at some of these texts. Now, if we think about that first rule, read the most recent texts, let's look and see what we get. First, we've got one from 2011, very contemporary. It's called Anthropology, A Global Perspective. We also have 2009 and 2005. Those are our three most recent. So the Anthropology, A Global Perspective, I think, is probably a really good one for April to use, actually. Because it says global, it's going to be a good overview of different ways of looking at anthropology throughout the world, which means it's going to cover a lot of different concepts. And it's very recent, so it will probably cover a lot of the older information as well. If we look at the 2009 text, now this is a journal article, and by and large you will find that journal articles are much more specific. They're going to hone in on a major specific topic and focus on one specific argument. In the case of this one, it's on families in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, it's probably a very good article, which is why the tutor has put it on the list, but it's probably a little too specific for this particular assignment, and it might be a waste of time to read, so I wouldn't recommend using this one. So let's clear that one out. And finally, we have one from 2005, The Anthropology of Religion, an Introduction. Though it's a recent text, it is another one that's a bit specific, looking just at religion. So While it might be useful to maybe skim through a little bit of it just to get a sense of how religion is studied in anthropology and maybe using that in the essay, I wouldn't focus a lot of time on this particular book. So we'll clear those out now and look at the other three. Let's see, we've got the uses of anthropology, and this one, that title sounds really good actually. What is anthropology used for? That would be a good aspect to cover in the essay. But it's from 1979, so it's a little bit old. It may not be the best thing to choose. At the same time, finding an old text that has been around for a long time can be a useful way of comparing and contrasting how anthropology was studied before and how it's studied now, and if there are any differences. So it may not be something to eliminate completely. It's worth considering. We also have Why Humans Have Cultures, which is from 1992. And this one, again, seems like a really useful question. Why do we have cultures? But again, since it's from 1992, many of the topics covered in it are probably covered in the more recent texts. And then finally, we have Small Places, Large Issues, An Introduction to Social and Cultural Anthropology. Now, this one is from 2001, so again, not the most recent, but it seems like a really good overview, and it covers, we know, both social and cultural anthropology, which is useful. But the main thing I want to point your attention to here is actually this bit, where it says Second Revised Edition. This means that it's been popular enough and important enough to come out in an additional edition from when it was first published. So that means it's a pretty useful and important text. It stood the test of time. So anytime you see something that's come out in multiple editions, I would recommend you think twice about ignoring it. It's probably worth reading. And then finally, we have the suggestion from April's friend Simon. Definitely, you can probably guess, not the best thing to be looking at. Anytime you're looking at a wiki, it means you're looking at material that anybody could have posted, and it may not be reliable. I'm not saying you should never use Wikipedia for information. Sometimes you can it's a really useful place to check dates or basic facts, but you never want to use it for things like arguments or essays. It's going to drag down the authority of your writing. So avoid those when you're doing academic writing whenever possible. So overall, what should April read? She wants to have a good basis, good background, some broad texts, but also some ways of having some specific examples. So obviously she should read the required reading. It's required for a reason. And then I would suggest the Small Places, Large Issues because it's clearly important, but it will cover some things like issues and debates within anthropology, so it should give her some specifics. And then I would also say the Anthropology of Global Perspective. That will probably cover a bunch of different bits and pieces that she could use in the essay. And then, of course, she should avoid Simon's suggestion. Okay, so once you have your sources, you need to think about how you're going to make the most of them. And one of the first things you should do is read introductions. Don't sit down and just try to read the whole book. Start with the intro, and usually you'll get what you need from that. You won't need to read the whole book. If there's other bits of information in the chapters, generally the introduction will point you to what you need to know in the other chapters, so you can go just read that specific chapter instead of the whole book. So definitely think about that. Also, skim through the table of contents and just see if you can spot bits of information that you're going to need and turn just to that chapter. It's a much better use of your time. And the same goes with the index. If once you're well into the research, you're going to find, okay, there's a specific topic I still need an example on. Go check the index, and there's probably 3 pages on that topic in the book that you have to read, and that way you're not spending your time reading through the entire book to find that one topic. So make use of indices. Think of it as reading around a text and not through it. So poke around, leaf back and forth, check the index, check the front, and dip in for what you need as opposed to reading from start to finish, because you just won't get through the material that way. And then once you are doing this, make sure you have a good, clear note-making system that you stick with. If you haven't developed a note-making system for yourself just yet, I would recommend you visit the Ask You link section, where we have lots of tips on note-making and tutorials on how you can develop a style for yourself. And finally, know your resources. Ask Academic Skills is located on the ground floor of the library. You can reach us at that email address or the website, and we're here to help out with just these sorts of issues. So give us a call, come visit, we'd love to see you. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for visiting.